Velkommen tilbage til kanalen. Jeg står her med ingen ringer end John Hattie, der er på besøg her i Horsens, og jeg har fået lov til lige at stille et par enkelte spørgsmål. So, thank you for doing this, John.
Pleasure.
You're a very busy gentleman. Busy week? You've been all over?
4 countries.
4 countries.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah. And I know you don't like doing these big sort of arena shows. You'd much rather like...
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm a talker. I'm an academic.
Yeah.
And so I know when I do these big shows like today with hundreds of people here, I think I can be a little entertaining, and I think I've got a great message.
Okay.
But I actually want to impact what happens in schools and what happens on students. So I have a team that comes in and does that kind of work, and they have much more impact. So provided they follow up, I'm more than happy to do this. As an academic, it's wonderful that someone cares.
Okay. Well, it's certainly very nice to have you here. And what I'd like to talk to you about is the field that I specialize in, which is inclusion.
Yes.
And I know that you deal more or less with the mainstream schooling issues. And I see a lot of overlaps, as Professor Mel Ainscough once said, a good school is an inclusive school. Yes. Can you comment on that?
A lot of the data that's in the work I'm doing are from those kind of students that are in those kind of special needs areas, and they're in regular schools and they're not in regular schools. And certainly the work I've done, the work Swanson's done, the work David Mitchell has done, the story about what works is very similar. Of course, there's some differences, but the overall story is extremely similar.
Okay. So do you agree that a good school is automatically, or almost automatically, one that can embrace a more diverse body of students?
I'd love to say yes. I think we have made a mistake of assuming, and I know this is not what you're saying, but we're assuming that inclusive schools must be better.
Yeah.
But they're not always necessarily better.
Right.
I want to have an impact on every student, and it's not always the school that does that.
No.
I think it's the teacher has a dramatic effect, peers have a dramatic effect, and great schools are those that are inclusive of all the students. My mantra is every student needs at least a year's growth for a year's input. Every student needs that, and therefore the notion of inclusion is really critical. I think that as we segregate some of these students, they miss a dramatic amount, but sometimes when we put them in an inclusive school, they also miss a dramatic amount, but it's a function of the teacher.
Yeah. So it all comes down to the teacher, really?
It's about teacher expertise, yes.
Okay.
And it's also about school leaders who understand the impact of their teachers and collectively work across the teachers so they all understand what impact means for all those students, including the inclusive kids.
Now, talking about inclusion, one of the big issues in Denmark, and I guess all around the world, is problem behavior. How do you see the issues that you address with your visible learning research? How does that connect with dealing with problem behavior?
You're not suggesting that inclusive kids are problem behaviours, are you?
No, I'm just saying that problem behavior is a big issue.
But it's right across, and that's the point I'm making. It's right across, and it's not specific to any kind of particular child. And it's a major issue.
Definitely, yeah.
The presence of 2 or 3 disruptive students in the class affects all the kids quite negatively. Excellent teachers have to deal with that. The question we have to ask all the time is about the nature of that problem behaviour, and it varies. It can be some really basic. Start that again. It can be some really developmental issues.
Yeah.
It can be boredom. It can be, and it's ways in which teachers can understand exactly where the student is and set the challenge using the Goldilocks principle. Not too hard, not too easy. That's the art.
Yeah.
Most kids will engage in learning if they think they're going to learn. And if they don't think they're going to learn, then the behaviour problems often manifest themselves dramatically. Now, I don't want to underestimate that it can be extremely difficult to do it, but there are some stunning teachers out there.
Yeah.
What I find interesting is that you can have a child who has very bad behaviour, and an hour later with another teacher they don't. What changed?
Yeah. Labeling students is something that you addressed in your presentation today, and it is seen as something that doesn't really help anybody. I very much agree.
I'm afraid it's worse than that. It can do a lot of harm.
Yeah.
I know many parents and many medicos want a label because quite reasonably diagnosis is critical. The difference is that in the medical profession, after they're diagnosed, they put in interventions. You try this drug, try this regime, etc. And they evaluate the impact of that intervention.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in education, we don't often do that. We label a kid, we diagnose them, and then we say, now we know why we can't.
Yeah.
Now we know why this child is different. And we don't trial multiple interventions. We don't evaluate the impact. In fact, many parents fundamentally believe that once a child is labelled, they label that for life.
Yeah.
You go and have a common cold, or you go and have leukemia.
Right.
The medical profession can actually fix that. But in education, unfortunately, we label, and unfortunately the implication is, and now you can't. We are actually very good at helping those kids.
Yeah.
And sometimes getting over some of the problems that they're diagnosed with. But that's the problem in our profession. We don't think we can. Some parents think that teachers don't understand if they think they can fix it. I think we can fix it. The evidence is there.
And definitely within the grey zone, where there isn't any specific diagnosis, but they're just problem behavior.
Oh, absolutely.
That's where I think it's really important to set in.
That's right. And in labelling those kids problem behaviours, they're more likely to be.
Yeah, yeah.
And the question again is understanding what leads to the problem behaviour. And this is where you can get help from other teachers to watch and observe when it starts to manifest itself. You can start to see some causes and understanding. And I'm not pretending it's easy, but it can be done. And there's some very good examples, and we've got some stunning methods about how we can help these kids. And probably the most important is finding out what challenges them and getting them to realise. Like, the research says that if you ask students before they come into your classroom, are you going to learn from this teacher? They are incredibly accurate before you start. So if they're coming into your classroom thinking they're not going to learn, they're probably going to be problems.
Right.
Fix it.
Yeah. So your research it has a big impact currently on the state of things in Denmark. Are you as a central researcher, are you afraid to be misinterpreted? Are you afraid that somebody will take a single point and then make it to something that it isn't?
Oh, and they certainly have.
Does it happen?
Oh, of course it does. And
I
get.
How do you feel about that?
Not nice. And I get messages from people in Denmark, and I think, where did that come from? On the other hand of it,
could you give us an example of
just before I go there?
Okay.
On the other hand, I don't want to then say nothing.
Right.
Which is so often what academics do. They don't say anything. I want to come and clarify.
Right.
Like, the biggest misunderstanding is people think that I'm arguing that we should increase class sizes, and I'm not.
No.
People are arguing that I'm saying that teachers should be in the classroom more often and not have time to collaborate. I've not ever said that. And there's quite a lot of other things people claim that I've said. I'd love the opportunity to interact with them and clarify that. If I'm wrong, I'm prepared to say I'm wrong. But certainly, there are some misinterpretations. Like the whole thing that I've tried to do for 20 or 30 years is to understand the story underlying these data. And all that story is a set of hypotheses. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
No one's contested the story yet. But I still could be wrong. And I'm constantly looking for other interpretations.
Yeah.
But sometimes there are very simplistic interpretations. Sometimes they're just wrong. On the other hand, I think most of the people I've interacted with know what I'm saying, and that's why today's like today are wonderful. I can talk to 500 or 600 people and tell the story as I see it.
Right, right. It certainly gives you something to think about when you say, well, research will show that, or indicate that this is not perhaps the best way to do it. Let's think about that.
Correct.
That's basically what you're saying, isn't it?
It is.
Let's think about it. It's a dialogue.
Totally.
It's a reflection.
But the other thing I'm trying to do desperately is to make sure we think about the things that matter.
Yeah.
Like when I listen to the dialogue here in Denmark, both in the media, amongst the politicians, and even amongst the educators, it's mainly about the things that don't matter. And that bothers me dramatically. Now, the other side of it, the things that matter, the teacher expertise, is a tough topic.
Yeah.
And like I know that when we work with schools and we ask questions about what do you mean by impact in the school? You know, what would you understand by the magnitude of the impact? For some schools, it's too hard. It's much easier to go back and talk about the things that don't matter. Let's talk about the curriculum. Let's talk about how we teach. Let's talk about the structure of the school. They're much more comfortable because they don't affect me.
Okay. So we need to talk about the things that matter, and the things that matter are difficult to talk about.
Yes.
So in a time of change, this will probably take a lot of time.
Oh, it does. And to add one more, it's not only difficult, but sometimes you can't see it.
Right.
Like you can see a new school, you can see a new curriculum, you can see a smaller class, you can see ability grouping. But sometimes out there in politician land and parent land, you don't see the investment in the expertise. But that is what dramatically makes the difference. That's what I'm very keen that we privilege. And certainly the other message I have is that every system I've been in, every system, and Denmark's a classic example, the success is already here. It's not coming next year, it's here. We have success in our teachers, in our schools. All I want Denmark to do is to dependably find out where that excellence is and get everyone to be like that.
All right. Very, very nice. All right, thank you.
How'd we go?
Så,
vi turned on?
vi ses næste gang.